In the weeks following the Centennial Olympic Park bombing, Atlanta faced the daunting task of moving forward. The city had been scarred, not only physically, but emotionally. The park itself, once a symbol of celebration and unity, remained a painful reminder of the night when joy turned to terror. Yet, amid the grief and destruction, something remarkable began to emerge, a quiet, determined resilience that would define Atlanta in the years to come. The immediate focus was on the victims and survivors. Hospitals worked tirelessly to treat the injured, many of whom required extensive care for burns, broken bones, and shrapnel wounds. Mental health professionals were brought in to provide counseling and support, recognizing that trauma would linger long after physical injuries healed. Families and friends struggled to comprehend their loss, grappling with the sudden absence of loved ones. Yet even in these darkest hours, communities came together, offering comfort, shelter, and assistance. Neighbors helped neighbors, and strangers extended kindness to those they had never met, demonstrating the city's unbreakable spirit. Memorials were quickly established to honor those who had lost their lives. White crosses and candles appeared along pathways, and public vigils drew thousands, all paying tribute to the victims and showing solidarity with their families. These ceremonies were both somber and empowering, a public acknowledgement of pain, but also a celebration of courage, heroism, and human connection. Survivors shared their stories of bravery: a teenager who shielded a younger sibling from falling debris, a stranger who carried an injured friend to safety, a first responder who ignored personal danger to save lives. These acts of heroism became the narrative that Atlanta clung to, proof that light could emerge from the darkness. The city also confronted its vulnerabilities. Security measures were overhauled for public events, with lessons learned from the bombing informing strategies nationwide. Law enforcement increased coordination with federal agencies, implemented stricter screening procedures, and invested in surveillance and emergency response systems. Centennial Olympic Park itself underwent renovations, incorporating design changes to ensure both safety and accessibility. Visitors returned, drawn by the park's restored beauty and the sense that Atlanta had reclaimed its space, refusing to let fear dominate its spirit. Over time, the narrative of tragedy evolved into one of resilience. Schools incorporated lessons about the bombing into history curricula, ensuring that future generations understood the gravity of the event, but also the courage it inspired. Community groups organized remembrance activities each year, fostering a sense of unity and continuity. The story of the bombing became a thread in the city's broader tapestry, a reminder that tragedy can coexist with hope, and that a community's strength is revealed not only in celebration, but in recovery. For many individuals, personal healing was a long journey. Survivors grappled with lingering trauma, the echoes of the blast replaying in nightmares and flashbacks. Families of the deceased sought solace in memorials, counseling, and community support, finding ways to honor loved ones while continuing to live. Support groups formed, connecting people who had shared the experience, offering understanding that only those who were there could provide. Slowly, the pain began to transform, becoming part of the story of survival, courage, and perseverance. The bombing also had a profound impact on the Olympic Games and global perception. The world watched Atlanta not merely as a city hosting international competition, but as a community confronting the harsh reality of domestic terrorism. International media highlighted the courage of the city's citizens and first responders, emphasizing the resilience that allowed Atlanta to continue celebrating sport and unity despite tragedy. The games themselves continued, but the memory of the blast lingered, a sobering reminder that joy and sorrow can coexist in the same space. Eric Robert Rudolph's eventual capture in 2003 provided a sense of justice, yet it could not erase the pain. His arrest, trial, and conviction closed a chapter of uncertainty, allowing victims, families, and the city to confront the past with clarity. The painstaking manhunt had demonstrated the persistence and dedication of law enforcement, while also reaffirming the principle that acts of terror, no matter how calculated, would not go unanswered. Rudolph became a symbol not only of evil, but also of the extraordinary effort required to bring justice to those affected by violence. Centennial Olympic Park today stands as both a memorial and a symbol of resilience. Visitors walk past fountains and shaded pathways, sometimes pausing at plaques and memorials dedicated to the victims. Annual ceremonies commemorate the lives lost, and the park hosts community events that celebrate unity, sportsmanship, and human achievement. Each footstep across the green lawns echoes with memory, a reminder of tragedy and the triumph of spirit that followed. The park is no longer only a site of grief, but a living testament to courage, healing, and hope. Atlanta itself emerged stronger. The city learned to balance vigilance with openness, ensuring that public events remained safe while still embracing the joy and diversity that defined its culture. Emergency preparedness became ingrained in civic planning, and the collective experience of trauma fostered a deeper sense of community. Residents could walk the streets with renewed confidence, understanding that while danger may exist, the response of a united city could overcome even the most shocking challenges. Ultimately, the legacy of the Atlanta Olympic Park bombing is complex. It is a story of violence, loss, and fear, but also of heroism, solidarity, and the power of the human spirit to endure. The tragedy forced Atlanta, its citizens, and the world to confront vulnerability, but it also highlighted the extraordinary capacity for courage, empathy, and resilience. In remembering the lives lost and the acts of bravery that arose in response, the city ensured that the story of the bombing would not be one of despair alone. Decades later, the memory of that night continues to shape Atlanta's identity. Visitors to the park may feel the echoes of history in the fountains, the pathways, and the memorials, but they also witness the vibrancy of a city that refuses to be defined by tragedy. Centennial Olympic Park remains a gathering place for celebration, reflection, and connection, a living monument to the idea that even after the darkest night, hope can endure and the human spirit can shine brighter than fear. Atlanta's story is now one of balance, acknowledging the pain of the past while celebrating the courage, resilience, and unity that followed. The Olympic Park bombing will forever be a part of the city's history, but it is remembered not only for the horror it inflicted, but for the strength and solidarity it inspired. In the hearts of those who survived, in the lives of those who carried forward the memory of the lost, and in the city that rebuilt itself with determination, the tragedy has been transformed into a testament to enduring hope. Atlanta was alive with anticipation in the summer of 1996. The city had spent years preparing to host the Centennial Olympic Games, a milestone that would bring athletes, dignitaries, and visitors from across the globe. Streets gleamed under the afternoon sun, banners fluttered from every lamppost, and the air carried a sense of expectation, excitement, and possibility. Locals and tourists alike felt the electricity of history in the making. Centennial Olympic Park, a sprawling green oasis at the heart of downtown, had become the gathering point for spectators eager to witness moments that would be etched forever in Olympic lore. Families strolled along the paved walkways, children clutching miniature flags as they marveled at the bright colors and sounds of the opening ceremonies. Vendors called out their wares, hot dogs, pretzels, and souvenirs, while musicians and street performers added a lively soundtrack to the city's festive rhythm. International visitors in vibrant national attire mingled with locals, exchanging smiles, photographs, and excitement. The Olympic spirit was tangible, an invisible thread weaving people together in celebration of sport, unity, and human achievement. Amid the joy, security personnel moved through the crowds with a quiet vigilance. Uniformed officers monitored the flow of people, scanning for potential threats. Undercover officers slipped unnoticed among the throngs, their eyes alert for any sign of trouble. In a city this large, hosting an event of this magnitude was a monumental challenge. Every detail, from crowd control to emergency response plans, had been meticulously coordinated. Yet, in the midst of optimism and celebration, there was an unspoken awareness that public events of this scale always carried a hidden risk. In the days leading up to the final week of the Games, Atlanta had become a city of contrasts. The skyline reflected modern ambition with its gleaming towers, while the streets buzzed with the chatter of excited fans. Hotels were packed to capacity, restaurants overflowed with visitors, and local businesses thrived as the influx of international guests poured into the city. For many residents, it felt like Atlanta had been transformed overnight into a vibrant, cosmopolitan metropolis. Life seemed almost magical, as if the city itself had been elevated to a stage where history would be witnessed in real time. Amid the crowds, small human dramas played out, unnoticed by the majority. A young boy tugged at his mother's hand, pointing excitedly at a gymnast from Russia performing a flawless routine on the big screen. An elderly couple clutched each other's hands, tears in their eyes as they watched a torchbearer carry the Olympic flame past the cheering crowds. Teenagers posed for photos, their laughter echoing above the din of conversation and music. Every face reflected hope, pride, and the shared belief that these games would be a celebration to remember. Centennial Olympic Park itself was a marvel of design. Its fountains sparkled in the sunlight, pathways wound gracefully through manicured lawns, and shaded areas offered respite from the heat. The park had been envisioned as a communal heart of the Games, a place where the public could experience the excitement of Olympic competition even without tickets to the stadiums. Large video screens broadcasted events live, drawing crowds who cheered and gasped in unison at each moment of triumph or heartbreak. The sense of camaraderie was palpable. Strangers laughed together, clapped together, and shared a fleeting sense of global unity that transcended borders, languages, and backgrounds. But amid the joy, shadows lingered unnoticed. In the nooks and corners of the bustling city, there were individuals whose presence went undetected, whose intentions were far from celebratory. Security briefings had warned of the possibility of domestic threats, of isolated acts of violence, but the city felt safe. The Olympics were meant to symbolize peace and goodwill. For most attendees, the idea that such a carefully curated celebration could be disrupted by deliberate malice was unthinkable. And yet, danger often hid in plain sight, disguised as the ordinary and mundane. The atmosphere of anticipation reached its peak during the concert nights at the park. Musicians and performers drew tens of thousands of spectators to the heart of the city, turning Centennial Olympic Park into a living, breathing festival. The scent of popcorn and grilled foods mingled with the summer night air, punctuated by the rhythmic beat of drums and the soaring notes of guitars. Fans swayed and danced, lost in the euphoria of music and the thrill of collective experience. It was a time when the city forgot its routines, when adults became children again, and strangers became friends in shared exhilaration. Among the crowd, individuals experienced their own personal moments of triumph. A young woman watched in awe as her favorite gymnast executed a perfect routine on the big screen, feeling a connection across oceans and languages. A family celebrated a child's first glimpse of the Olympic flame, capturing the memory on a camera that would be treasured for decades. Friends toasted to friendship and the spirit of competition, while solo travelers absorbed the wonder of being part of something bigger than themselves. The city's heartbeat was strong and the energy contagious. Yet, even in moments of joy, tension simmered beneath the surface. Security officials were aware that any large gathering could become a target. Every entrance was monitored, every suspicious item noted, every potential risk assessed. The public, however, remained blissfully unaware, caught up in the illusion that the Olympics were a bubble of safety and unity. Atlanta, for its part, projected confidence and calm, masking the meticulous preparation and vigilance that went into safeguarding the games. As the day turned to evening, the city glowed with lights and excitement. Street lamps cast a warm glow over the avenues, neon signs reflected in puddles from an earlier summer shower, and the fountains of Centennial Olympic Park shimmered like liquid diamonds. The music swelled, laughter echoed, and a sense of possibility filled the air. It was a night that promised celebration, connection, and memories that would last a lifetime. And yet, in the heart of the crowd, among the faces lifted towards the stage, there was an unseen presence, quietly observing, waiting for the moment to disrupt the harmony. The city, alive with dreams and joy, was on the cusp of experiencing a moment that would forever change its history. The anticipation of triumph and human achievement hung in the air like electricity, but danger had already begun to weave itself into the tapestry of celebration. Atlanta was radiant, hopeful, and unsuspecting, a city that would soon face a test of courage, resilience, and unity, unlike any it had ever known. The evening of July 27, 1996, began like any other night of celebration at Centennial Olympic Park. Crowds of families, friends, and tourists packed the green lawns, excited for a concert featuring popular musicians. The air vibrated with music, laughter, and the hum of conversation in dozens of languages. Vendors weaved through the crowd, balancing trays of food, shouting cheerfully to attract customers. The park glowed under stadium lights, reflecting off the fountains and casting long shadows across the pathways. Amid the joyous chaos, the city's excitement felt almost tangible, an electric current running through the sea of people. Teenagers danced in circles, couples clutched hands and swayed to the music, and children laughed, lifted high on their parents' shoulders. Security personnel moved silently among them, scanning faces, checking bags, and whispering to each other in quiet tones. To the average attendee, the officers were reassuring figures, a reminder that the city was safe and protected. No one noticed the subtle tension in the eyes of some officers, the quiet anxiety born of experience and anticipation. Then, just as the headline act struck the first powerful chords, the world changed in an instant. A deafening explosion erupted near the heart of the crowd. The ground shook beneath their feet, sending vibrations through shoes, chairs, and the very bones of those standing nearest. A plume of smoke shot into the night sky, dark and twisting, mingling with the illuminated haze of the park lights. Confusion erupted immediately. People froze, stunned by the roar, unsure whether it was part of the show or something far worse. Moments later, chaos took over. Screams pierced the air, a mixture of panic, shock, and pain. Attendees scattered in every direction, knocking over tables, tripping on pathways, and colliding in blind fear. Parents grabbed their children, shielding them as debris rained down, metal and glass scattering among the crowd. The music, once the heartbeat of the celebration, was drowned out by sirens, screams, and the ringing in ears from the blast. Emergency responders surged into the chaos with astonishing speed. Firefighters and paramedics pushed through the panicked crowd, moving toward smoke, flame, and injured victims. They worked to clear paths for the injured, carrying children, parents, and strangers alike to safety. Some people, despite their fear, helped strangers, lifting debris or guiding the blind and elderly out of harm's way. In those first horrifying minutes, heroism emerged amid panic, ordinary people transformed into saviors by circumstance. The human toll was immediate and devastating. 2 lives were lost that night, innocent bystanders who had come to celebrate unity and the Olympic spirit. Over 100 were injured, suffering burns, broken bones, and shrapnel wounds. Blood stained the green lawns, shoes and personal belongings scattered among fragments of metal and shattered glass. The joyous energy that had filled the park only moments before was replaced with horror, disbelief, and grief. People screamed for missing friends, searched desperately for loved ones, and tried to comprehend the sudden eruption of violence in a place built for happiness. The authorities acted quickly to cordon off the area. Roads were closed, emergency medical tents were set up, and helicopters hovered overhead to provide air support and survey the damage. Police officers interviewed witnesses as they were able, capturing details from those whose memories were still raw, fragmented by shock. Television crews broadcast live scenes from the park, showing footage of the explosion's aftermath and the panic that had swept the crowd. News anchors struggled to find words, their voices tight with disbelief, as images of smoke, debris, and frightened families filled homes across the nation. Amid the destruction, stories of courage and resilience emerged. A man lifted a young girl over a fallen barrier, sprinting through smoke and confusion to reach safety. 2 women, carrying a badly injured friend between them, navigated through the crowd, shielding her from falling debris. First responders moved with remarkable precision despite the chaos, pulling victims from beneath fallen structures and tending to critical injuries with limited resources. These acts of bravery stood in stark contrast to the violence that had shattered the park, revealing the humanity that thrives even in the darkest moments. The investigation began immediately. Crime scene investigators combed through the wreckage, photographing every fragment, mapping the blast pattern, and collecting clues. Metal fragments from the device, fingerprints, and other evidence were meticulously documented. Forensic teams worked late into the night, knowing that every detail could be critical in identifying the person responsible. Meanwhile, city officials faced the dual challenge of ensuring public safety and managing the fear that now gripped Atlanta. Schools, businesses, and visitors wondered whether the city would ever feel safe again. The psychological impact was profound. Survivors spoke of feeling trapped in a nightmare, of hearing the blast replay in their minds, and watching strangers carried away in bloodied clothing. Some recounted the split-second decisions they had made to protect themselves or others, moments that would haunt and define them for years. Families called loved ones repeatedly, desperate for news, as uncertainty and fear dominated the night. The explosion had not only caused physical harm, but had shaken the collective sense of security, turning a celebration into a scene of tragedy. In the days that followed, media coverage intensified. Images of smoke rising from the park, victims being treated on the scene, and solemn city officials addressing the public became the face of Atlanta in the eyes of the world. Experts debated the motives, the methods, and the implications of the attack. Citizens demanded answers, seeking accountability and reassurance that the city could recover. The Centennial Olympic Park, once a symbol of unity and celebration, had become a stark reminder of vulnerability, a site where innocence had been shattered in an instant. Despite the fear and grief, Atlanta's spirit was not broken. Volunteers arrived at hospitals to assist with the influx of injured, neighbors opened their homes to displaced families, and citizens organized vigils to honor the victims. The city refused to let the attack define it, choosing instead to demonstrate resilience and compassion. In the midst of destruction, the best of humanity shone through, the courage of first responders, the selflessness of strangers, and the determination of a city to heal together. As the night stretched on, the enormity of the event settled over Atlanta like a heavy cloud. Questions remained unanswered, the perpetrator still unknown, and the path to justice unclear. Yet the city, scarred but unbowed, began the difficult process of mourning, investigating, and rebuilding. The blast had stopped time in that park, but it could not extinguish the determination of a community committed to standing together. In the days following the bombing, Atlanta struggled to regain its composure. Centennial Olympic Park, once a place of celebration and unity, now lay cordoned off with yellow tape, metal fragments scattered across the lawns, and scorch marks marring the concrete. The blast had left not only physical damage, but a lingering sense of vulnerability. Residents, visitors, and officials alike were gripped by the unsettling question: who could commit such an act in the heart of a joyous festival? Law enforcement moved quickly, mobilizing a task force that combined local police, the FBI, and federal explosives experts. Hundreds of officers and investigators sifted through the wreckage, cataloging every fragment of evidence, taking witness statements, and analyzing photographs and video footage from the park. Every detail mattered: the placement of debris, the type of explosive used, and even the behavior of the crowd in the moments before the blast could provide vital clues. Investigators worked around the clock, driven by the urgency of catching someone who had struck at the very heart of a city celebrating international unity. The initial phase of the investigation was frustratingly opaque. Few witnesses had seen anything clearly, as smoke, confusion, and panic had consumed the park within seconds. Some described a suspicious figure moving through the crowd earlier in the evening. Others recalled an unattended backpack or package that seemed out of place. Forensic teams analyzed fragments of metal, traces of explosives, and wiring recovered from the site. Every piece told a story, but it was a story fragmented and incomplete, like a puzzle with missing pieces. As investigators delved deeper, a pattern began to emerge. The bombing at Centennial Olympic Park was not an isolated incident. A careful review of other recent bombings in the southeast United States revealed similarities in explosive devices, construction methods, and placement strategies. Authorities began to suspect a domestic perpetrator, someone experienced with explosives and driven by ideological motivations rather than random malice. The possibility that the same individual might strike again heightened the urgency of the investigation. The trail eventually led to Eric Robert Rudolph, a man whose name would soon become infamous. A white supremacist and anti-government extremist, Rudolph had a history of violence and a deeply entrenched ideology. Investigators pieced together his movements, learning that he had previously targeted abortion clinics and other locations that aligned with his extremist beliefs. Rudolph was careful, methodical, and elusive, leaving behind minimal evidence and relying on the cover of remote forests and rural areas to evade capture. To law enforcement, he became a ghost, one who had struck at the Olympics with precision and confidence, and who now threatened to disappear into the shadows again. The hunt for Rudolph became a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Federal agents scoured forests, mountains, and remote towns, following tips from informants and analyzing leads that ranged from credible to wildly speculative. They monitored known associates, checked license plates, and reviewed surveillance footage from nearby locations. Each breakthrough sparked hope, only to be tempered by the realization that Rudolph was always a step ahead. His knowledge of the terrain, his ability to move silently, and his lack of attachment to any single location made him a nightmare for investigators. Media coverage intensified, both aiding and complicating the search. News outlets broadcast photos of Rudolph, details of his ideology, and descriptions of his last known whereabouts. Public fascination grew, fueled by the horror of the Olympic bombing and the intrigue of a fugitive operating in the shadows. Some speculated about his motives, others about his next potential target. Families across the nation followed the story closely, horrified that such a violent individual could evade capture for so long. The combination of fear, fascination, and outrage created a charged atmosphere that pushed law enforcement to accelerate their efforts. Despite the pressure, law enforcement remained meticulous. Bomb technicians reconstructed devices from recovered fragments, seeking fingerprints, DNA, and design patterns. Behavioral analysts profiled the perpetrator, predicting his movements, understanding his ideology, and assessing the likelihood of future attacks. Every piece of evidence was cross-referenced with prior incidents, forming a detailed map of Rudolph's patterns and preferences. The investigation was exhaustive, combining cutting-edge forensics with old-fashioned legwork and sheer persistence. As the search continued, Rudolph's past acts of violence came to light. Authorities connected him to bombings at abortion clinics and other public locations, revealing a disturbing pattern of extremist-driven attacks. His ability to strike quickly and vanish without a trace had earned him a reputation for cunning and ruthlessness. For Atlanta, the Olympic bombing had been a sudden, terrifying awakening. For investigators, it was a chapter in a broader pattern of domestic terrorism that had eluded capture for years. Public fear was palpable. Citizens wondered if the bomber could strike again, if another attack might occur in a place where families and visitors gathered in safety in celebration. Law enforcement worked tirelessly to reassure the public while continuing the manhunt, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and community cooperation. Flyers, public announcements, and media campaigns urged people to report any suspicious activity, creating a network of eyes and ears across the city and state. Months turned into years as Rudolph evaded capture. He moved through remote areas of the Appalachian wilderness, living off the land, and relying on a network of sympathizers who provided temporary shelter. His knowledge of the terrain and his commitment to remaining undetected made him nearly invisible to authorities. Yet law enforcement never wavered, combining patience, determination, and a relentless commitment to justice. Each lead, each clue was carefully examined with the goal of bringing the man responsible for the Olympic bombing to justice. Finally, after years of pursuit, the relentless efforts of federal agents paid off. Rudolph was captured in 2003, ending a 7-year manhunt that had gripped Atlanta, the nation, and the world. His arrest brought relief, closure, and the opportunity for victims and survivors to confront the man who had caused such destruction. For the city, it was a moment of vindication, a testament to the perseverance, expertise, and courage of law enforcement officials who had refused to let a ghostly figure of terror escape accountability. The hunt for Rudolph revealed not only the depths of his planning and ideology, but also the extraordinary work of those who brought him to justice. Atlanta, scarred by tragedy, had witnessed the worst of human intent, but it had also witnessed the best of human resilience, courage, and determination. The Olympic bombing became a defining moment, a reminder of the fragility of public safety and the importance of vigilance, yet also a testament to the power of justice and persistence.